May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable unto you, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. How often do we as individuals, as people of faith and as the church, dismiss ideas and thoughts because they don't come from a source we see as being an expert? How often when we hold seminars or consult someone about something that we're struggling with, do we choose someone we think is an expert, whether they're familiar to us or not? Often today that expert is the internet, isn't it? We see that as a tool that's impartial and through which we can access anything without bias, forgetting that it's all entered by individuals. Yet look at all the misinformation that's available. I have a condition that doctors are looking into as far as how to treat it goes, and while they've been very good at informing me about it and answering all my questions, I still had to go on the internet to research it. And the very first thing I saw said that it was a fatal condition and I should get my affairs in order and be prepared. Absolutely shocked me. Now, fortunately, I believed my doctors who said it was treatable once they found out the cause, and I searched further and found more and better information about it and was encouraged with what it said. We often need assurance when information that's important to us comes from someone we aren't really sure about, and that who really understands or knows all they could about what they're talking about. We don't trust the familiar, because after all, our situation is unique, and perhaps they don't truly understand it. Jesus was preaching and working in an area that was filled with folks who were familiar with not only him, but his family and his history. They weren't sure that someone who they knew so well and in different circumstances could really be who he said he was, and could do all that they said he'd done. We can definitely identify with how they felt today, can't we? I'm sure there are many times that our familiarity with our faith has caused us to pass over things that we should really stop and look at much more closely. Interesting that it is the familiar and the ordinary that Jesus brought faith to our world in. How often do we turn to the manna that's given to us and expect from it what the living bread of faith can really do? To eat the living bread, to follow a life of faith and God's desire for us, means taking God into ourselves and changing us. The greatest example of this, of course, recently is the pandemic. Up until that point in time, one of the most familiar phrases in every parish church when we discussed faith and ministry that's being done was, "But we've never done it that way before." Since COVID, that phrase has pretty much disappeared. And even more importantly, the attitude from which it came has as well. No longer do we simply look at what we've done as church over the years and accepted that that's the only way we could or should do it. Yes, the church is important, and so is tradition. And what we've done in the past shapes who we will be in the future. But it should be seen as a light guiding us, not a box inhibiting us. Because of the pandemic, we've had to move forward into avenues of worship that we'd never thought about doing before, such as Zoom meetings and broadcasting our services online. It has forced other things as well because of the changes that we've made. If you have a group of folks who only attend service and worship online, how do you count them as members? And do you? How do you attract them to give to the church, both of themselves and of their gifts? Many have re-examined their priorities and are no longer willing to spend so much time doing for others, but need to spend at least as much time looking at themselves and their loved ones, for their closest and dearest need their time and attention as well. The ministries, or just how we can do them, has had to be changed. Volunteers, according to the experts, aren't willing to give as much of themselves for an infinite period of time any longer. People today are willing to volunteer for something that they hold dear in their hearts, but usually only for a specified period of time, not ad infinitum. They now say that if you want to get a ministry started, you need to find someone who's already invested in it or looking at it, and then set a time frame to begin it and to get it moving, or to change it slightly so that others can jump in and take over. We are capable of change, and recognizing God and our faith at work in the ordinary, however, sometimes has to give us a little nudge. One theologian wrote the following: "There is something within us that likes our gods high and lifted up, distant, exclusively in heaven. We so want religion to be something spiritual rather than something that is uncomfortably incarnational. Yet here we are, with God in the flesh before us, saying, 'I'm your bread, feed on me.' We are bundles of seemingly insatiable need, rushing here and there in a vain attempt to assuage our emptiness. Our culture is a vast supermarket of desire. Can it be that our bread, our wine, our fulfillment stands before us in the presence of this crucified, resurrected Jew? Can it be that many of our desires are, in the eternal scheme of things, pointless? Might it be true that he is the bread we need, even though he is rarely the bread we seek?" Paul once again draws us back to the things we need to focus on. And in this particular section of his letter to the church in Ephesus is community. While our community has changed over time and because of necessity, we are still a community. As Paul says, we are members one of another. The church needs to be a place where a real level of community has developed, where people feel free and safe to care about one another, to disagree with one another, and yes, even to get angry with one another, yet continue to love one another. A relationship of honesty and trust is what Paul is calling the church of his time and ours to live out. Paul reminds us that what we say counts. That old phrase, like many from the past, that says, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me," isn't valid any longer. Words hurt and lead to problems for the future, depending upon how they are taken. The church has especially recognized this in regards to racism lately. We now have to attend a workshop, both clergy and laity, on how what we say and can do does hurt and needs to be examined and maybe even changed. It's about time it happened. Paul says we are the imitators of God. Now there's a challenge. And it's going to take years for us to attain that, if ever. But perhaps it's the journey that is of most importance, the growing and learning that takes place. Life in the future is going to be far more demanding than it has been for both us and the church. And we're going to have to look at what we do and say more closely and with different lenses than we have in the past. Change is not always bad or difficult, but it is always a time when it causes ready to take notice of what we do and say and examine just how important and satisfactory it is, and just how much it enriches us and others in the faith journey. My prayer for all of us is that we know the living bread of our Jesus in our faith, that we see it in the everyday, that we appreciate it, and that we continue to build a community that instills love, trust, and honesty in all and for all. That we do more than invite God as a guest into our lives, where things change only slightly and just for a little while. That we invite God into our lives to share our lives with us. That we are shaped and formed into being like God through the building of community and all that it can bring both to ourselves, our neighborhood, and our world. Amen.